So I am starting a new series today called Explain This. The main idea behind the series is this. I am seeking to please Christ with all of my heart. And I hope that your goal is to seek to please Christ with all your heart. And if that is true, if you are trying to seek to please Christ with all your heart, we are on the same team. We're not enemies because we believe differently. We are on the same team seeking to please Christ. Now, if someone falls into false teaching or in error, it is our job to help those believers come out of their error. And the only way you can do that, you're not going to walk up and say, you're wrong and I'm right. What we need to do is walk alongside that person who's been deceived and be like, show me why you believe this. Can you show me the verses as to why you believe this such thing? And then we look at it, we examine it, and we study what it says to see maybe our own selves were in error and we thought that they were in error. The main thing is getting into the scriptures and seeing, have I been deceived? Am I believing something wrong? And it's my hope that the comment section of this video or the comments on our podcast, which you may be listening to, will be full of discussion talking on these different subjects and passages and beliefs. Today's video is on, does God hate sinners? And I'm of the opinion that God does hate sinners. Chances are many of you disagree with me about that. And you believe that maybe God hates the sin, but loves the sinner. But he doesn't hate sinners, or why would he die for sinners? And I want to get into some scriptures. I will also bring up, I made a video called Lovey-Dovey Jesus, where I kind of get into a lot of the scriptures, which you can watch on our YouTube channel. I'll leave a link to that in the description of the YouTube channel. Or you can just search for it on YouTube, Lovey-Dovey Jesus. But I want to get into some scriptures here and examine this and see what this passage is actually saying. Let's go to Psalm 5, verse 5. That's the passage I'm looking at. We'll look at one more. But Psalm 5, verse 5. It says, "The foolish shall not stand in thy sight. Thou hatest all workers of iniquity." And for the sake of those who may not be able to understand King James language, I'm just going to read some of the modern versions. I don't condone all of these versions, but I think they kind of help make sense of what this is saying, just for those who don't know the fancy words. NIV says, "The arrogant cannot stand in your presence. You hate all who do wrong." New Living Translation, "Therefore the proud may not stand in your presence, for you hate all who do evil." I'm just going to read this last part here through all these translations. "You hate all evildoers. You hate all workers of iniquity. You hate all who do iniquity. Hatest all workers of iniquity. You hate all evildoers. And you hate evil people. You hate all wicked people. You hate all evildoers." All the versions are repeating the exact same language here. Some of them say it a lot more clearly than the KJV. With the KJV's Old English. That's why I'm reading these. Good News Translation, "You hate all wicked people." How do you make sense of this? If you do not believe that God hates sinners, believe he just hates the sin, but he doesn't hate the sinner, how do you make sense of Psalm 5:5? Because it's not saying that he just hates the sin. If that were the case, all these newer translations would try and add that in and kind of make it seem more like that. They can't do that with this passage because it literally says straightforward that he hates evil people. He hates workers of iniquity. He hates all who do evil. How would you explain that? Because this is one of the verses that holds me at the idea that God hates sinners. This is one of the verses that keeps me in that mindset. I want to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments. Let me read one more passage here. Psalm 11:5. which they're not all from Psalms. There's other passages you can get into. For at least this video, I'm going to be just sticking with Psalms. But Psalm 11:5, the Lord trieth the righteous, but the wicked and him that loveth violence his soul hateth. So it says, the Lord trieth the righteous, but then it says, but the wicked and him that loveth violence his soul hateth. His soul hateth who? The wicked and him that loveth violence. How do you make sense of this? Some people may brush it off as, oh, this is the Old Testament, doesn't apply. God's character doesn't change towards sin. It's not that he hated sinners in the Old Testament, and now he's decided that he doesn't hate sinners. God's character doesn't change. I mean, there were times God changed his mind, like with the Ninevites, where God changed his mind about making man in Genesis chapter 6. But it clearly says that God hates sinners. How do we make sense of this? How do we explain that? Or even some of the other passages out there, where like Jeremiah 16:5, where it says that God removes his love from people. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments. How do you explain this? Is this passage, how do we make sense of that when it literally says God hates sinners? Don't just go start quoting John 3:16 to me. If you guys start quoting John 3:16 in the comments, I'm going to be like, you didn't watch the whole video. I understand God has a love for his creation. At least that's what I personally believe. God loves his creation, but when his creation goes off into sin, he cannot love it anymore, which is thus the reason why he came to save sinners from sin. He doesn't want them to be a sinner anymore. He hates the sinner. He loves his creation. He made his creation. He called it good, but it's become corrupt and evil, and he's trying to destroy that part of them. But it is part of them. You can't separate the sinner from the human being. The human being is the sinner. Explain to me this.